Learning Ablat Gemara. Today's daf is daf Hey Masechta Avodah Zarah. We're learning about that the whole that David Melech and the Egel was all done as per plan. So teach us the concept of tshuva. So we're up to the Gemara about 10 lines from the top of the page. No more than that. Sorry. We're up to Amar Reish Lakish, about 20 lines from the top of the page. Continuing on the same theme. Amar Reish Lakish. We should actually thank our forebears. Why? They wouldn't have sinned. They wouldn't have sinned by the Egel Hazav. They would have been like angels, like Malachim. And if Malachim, you can't bear children. So we would not have existed. Shenema, because it says, Ani amarti Elikim atem. I said that you should be like Elikim, Ubnei Elyon, and you'll be like Malachim. Kulchem chapaltem. Kulchem, you'll all be like Malachim, which means that we wouldn't have children. Chapaltem masechem, but you ruined it when you made Egel. So we're happy that we're come. Now, Yitez already asked. We said that everyone agrees that it's better that we were not created at all in the beginning of Erevin. So we'll be thanking our forebears for bringing us the world. We're better off not coming. So Taisa says that's only if you turn out to be a Rasha. But if you turn out to be a tzaddik, then on the contrary, you can only do mitzvahs here in this world. So it's better that we were born. Says the Gemara. It says in the pasuk. It says It says you will die like a person, and like one of the officers, you'll fall down. So he says, remember, it sounds like the Eloi Chatu lo have a right? It sounds like that if it wouldn't have been the fact that they sinned, they goes up, we would never be born. How can it be? Well, see, we have a whole parsha in the beginning of the Torah of Ata Pruruvu, mitzvah to multiply. Well, and you're telling me it wouldn't have existed. So it was Ad Sinai. That mitzvah started from Benaneach and went all the way to Har Sinai. So you go home to back to your wives. In other words, procreate. So you no, go back and enjoy your wife, but not to have children because they're all malachim. It says in the pasuk that I will talk more about this pasuk later. I wish that their hearts would belong to me and they'd fear me and keep all my mitzvahs in order for me to do good to them and to their children. Klor, that what? And this is written, in Chumash, right after Har Sinai. So the Gemara says, I was talking to those who already exist. Things will be good. That this is the sefer of of all those who were born in this world. And it says, "Be safer. What safer we should have? Hashem showed them every single generation. Its leaders, and its wise people, and all of its, I guess Parnosov are those who take care of the Gashmis, the physical needs of the community. So you already then we knew that there will be future generations." And Nochma says, when it came to generation of Rabbi Akiva, he was happy with his Torah, and his Atzib and Misasai was very upset how Rabbi Akiva has met his final end. Omer, he said to Hashem, I don't understand your machshavas. So we're learning over here, as Shlaka says, we're continuing the theme that we have to thank them for the ego. Before we said they taught us the concept of tshuva. Now he's saying we would have been malachim and we would never have had children. We would never have been born. Now that they did the egel, so they became human, and therefore we were born. Thank God for that. How can you even say that? It was always planned to have generation, and we're going through here that Sefer Torah Adam, those future generations. Louder.
But after that came all to the Sefer, they need more protective layers to be able to withstand the 1,000 Nefesh Bahamas.
Okay, Bob Rabbi Yavishi said, "Ain't Ben David Bob, Ben David will not come." This was a campaign that Rebbe had in the early 80s. Ad sheyichul neshama shel guf, Mashiach will not come until all the neshamas that are in this chamber called Guf are used up. Shenemar says, I will not continue fighting forever, but I will not be angry forever. Ki ruach milfonai. And Rashi learns ruach means in the shamas. Before me yativ, and that's delaying because the shamas and the I made so many neshamas. So the only thing that's delaying Mashiach is in the shamas that have to all be used up. Tais says ruach means is Mashiach. Mashiach is ruach, and he says ki ruach mafaniyata. The reason why I'm delaying Mashiach is because neshama tzitzik. Remember, I made a whole campaign about family planning. You have to have all the neshamas in a goof. Tais asks a very, I don't know, interesting question. You have to understand what his question is. Tais says, okay, so the Eden won't have any children, but the guy will have children. So they'll use up all the neshamas in the goof. And Tais's answer is that no, there were two separate chambers, one for the Yiddish neshamas, one for the Goyish neshamas. So you have to wonder what was Tais's question in the first place. When he thought the neshamas of a Yidden and a Goy exactly the same. Tais's didn't learn chassidus. What does it even mean? What was the question in the first place? And then Taisa says an interesting thing, but it's like clearly Mashiach will come that the women will give birth the same day they become pregnant, or that they give birth every day. So Taisa says that will be neshamas chadoshes. Not recycled neshamas. That was the chiddush of the Alter Rebbe, that he had a neshama chadash, even though it was prior to Mashiach coming. But post Mashiach, anybody will be born will be a neshama chadash. Anyway, so bottom line is we always know it will be future generations. So what's the mice with the eagle? As it says, doesn't mean that we would not have been born. It'll be like we weren't born. Why? Because everyone will live forever. And therefore, if everyone will live forever, if our parents are still alive forever, those who stood by Har Sinai, for example, then it'll dwarf the future generations, and they'll feel like their lusty will be nothing, and they'll feel like they're nothing. So kilil loiban, as if we know it don't exist. So the member says the Gemara. So what are you saying? The Eloi Chotzu Lamamaiser. You're saying they wouldn't have sinned; they never would have died. Well, see, Parshas Yevamah is a Parshas Nachlas. It says in Parshas the trade about Yevamah, the husband dies at Nachlas. Don't understand the Gemara's question. We had in Sanhedrin that parsha of Dachas and the parsha Ben Shayin murder never had Lahayiv Lahiyah. So why can't there be two other parshas of Lahayiv Lahiyah? Number one, and for that you can say maybe this goes according to the other Tana. You remember the other Tana said, there's a Modoya. I sat on the tombstone where it says here's the Dachas. Here was, so maybe this mother goes according to that. But then they have to ask the question: why couldn't somebody be killed? People don't die naturally, but maybe the parsha of Yevamah, the parsha of Nachlas, somebody was murdered. Don't know.
The Torah itself records many deaths.
No, that was but that was before we became Eden. Talking about Eden. So from Har Sinai onwards. Then was a miksiva kroya al tanai. Well, you find such a concept that tells you something that this will only happen on a condition. Oh, it's parsha Yevamah, parsha Nachlas. If you guys are going to sin in the Egel Azov, so then these are going to be the laws because mitzvah will come into effect. Interesting that Ramban writes in the beginning of Chumash Dvarim that all the mitzvahs which triggered by Yevamah, Yibum, and Nachlas, all in Chumash Dvarim, were not given to the Eden until the end of the 40 years. So what's the one question in the first place? The Egel's already happened. Unless the pshat is Moshe Rabbeinu received it on Har Sinai before the Egel Azov, but he did not transmit it to the Eden until whatever in the Pashas and the Torah. So the Yibum, the Nachlas, he did not give it over to them till the end of the 40 years. But the Abish already gave him all these rules in Har Sinai. The question is, how come? Yes, we have a Ma'aser time. Yesterday, what's that principle there? Hey, they accept Torah great. And if not, you'll revert back to naught. Basically, has a question. Exactly. So we do have it tonight. So we're saying that Eden would have lived forever. That's what happened. Goes up that no longer lived forever. That they had to die. There's a pasuk which we just mentioned the end of the pasuk before, but now the full pasuk. The pasuk says, "Megitin, I wish you would give a that your heart would be that your heart will be with the Eibush the whole time." And it says there, "Levatul mehem malach to say that they will no longer die, impossible. It was already Xeda that after the Marisha that the need to submit to Layla. Allah kibbutz it the Eden was so. What's the idea then? That if the Eden would not accept the Torah, the only reason why they accepted the Torah is so that no other nation can have any control over them. So it says that they will live for what's the Yitav Lehem? That no nation can control over them. But we see clearly from here, there was always destined to have Misa. What are you telling me that prior to Egel Azov, they would not have died? And now that the Egel Azov, they're all going to die. It says there that the Abraham says, "Man yitel have a name." The Gemara says you're right. That's what this brayso holds clearly, that Misa always was, and that isn't what Egel Azov changed. I'll be Haitana. He holds who don't Haitana. Tanya be saying like keep it so. You know why they kept Torah, and not to make sure that no nation can control them. El Kadesh Lo Yehei Malach Hamav Shelben. They should die. The Malach of Misa shouldn't have any shlit over them. No, this is the opinion we said before. Prior to Egel Azov, the Eden would live forever. And we would be like non-existent because if our parents from Har Sinai were alive, they'll dwarf us and they will completely eclipse our Metzias and we'd be nobodies because they saw Har Sinai. What are we? Nothing. So that's what happened. And then came Egel Azov, and people started to die. And not like the Braisa that says that Misa was always nicked so we couldn't get out of it. Shenemar, it says, that I said that you are Kimat Elyon Kulchem. What do you mean Elyon? That you live forever. Like Malachim. And Chabalta Masechem, but you ruined it with your Maisa with the Egel Hazav. So the Gemara, and then it says in the next film, you will die. Clearly, that is what changed. That before you wouldn't have died, and now you will die. So the Gemara, Rabbi Yesi also states clearly the pasuk Leman Yitav Lehem Lenech, he'll give them good. So it sounds like there's something else. He says it. The Hamisa L'chayda. It sounds like that's not so much that they were going to die, or they live not going to die, but other things. That the Ma'yitolach, you kept the everything else. The Ma'yitolach, the greatest tova you can have is a person never dies. So therefore, it's consistent with my opinion. The Tanakh says that they always plant. There's a Gzeda Nigzer, and you cannot change it. They're always going to die anyway. That it sounds like, and now you will die because of the Egel Azov. Now you are going to die, right? Because in Chabalta Masechem, you ruined it with your mice and the Egel Azov. So Gemara says, who said that dying is literally dying? We learned that there's 4 types of death. My Misa Anil, maybe Misa means poverty. And we had this in the Dor. We learned there's 4 different types of experiences that a person goes through. All of them, as if you're dead. Eluhain, Oni, poverty, Sumer, being blind, Mitzoida, leper, Umisha, Engle, Bonim, you have no children to pass on. Oni, it says, by Odosavil, it says, Ki Mesu Kol Hanoshi. All the people died. So you can go back to Mitzrayim, it's safe. But we know Odosavil still lives, they continue on. In this parsha, they continue on. So, so he said, "Kimei kol anashim." Even though it says in Sforno, those of them are great people. Kimei kol anashim. So how do we know that it means anias? Maybe they won't become mitzvah. We just said the 4 kinds of anias. It couldn't be mitzvah because it says in this parsha that bekev kol amach. It could have been mitzvah. It could have been they were healed by matan Torah, but we know that after Egel Azov, all the sicknesses came right back with a vengeance. So therefore, they couldn't be mitzvah. It couldn't be tzaras. Couldn't be blind. He couldn't be blind because then it says, should I, blind them? But the blind already blind them the second time. And so therefore, it could be they didn't have any children. What's the relevance of that? They didn't have no children, therefore they have no influence upon it. Must be that they were unneed. Before you do ask, and I don't see an answer, how do we know that what happened here was unneed? As this pasuk that says, because of Egel Azov, you're going to be, he says, means unneed. Maybe it means blind, maybe it means not having children in the future. How do we know which one of these? Or maybe all 4, some this, some that, some this. How do you know it means only anis? Anyway, Oman knew who were they does not read them. For me, Maces they die. Me, Maces, they were still existed, they were there every trouble, every part of the way. I was saying and they became poor. And so blind, you said, you put me in the darkness like the Mesa Olam. So you see the dark, you can't see. But try to see, I'll not take the story of Aaron and Miriam, I'm not keeping a mace. She became a trade like a mace. No children receive. Rachel said, I feel like I'm a dead person. But we learned. The Abish is pleased, just like we said before. The Abish says that, me yitin halavai, who should give, and they'll have, they'll spare me. So the Abish is pleading with us. The same thing over here. Is a plea. Please follow my bechukos. If halavai, my nation, listen to me, I'll crush it all, subdue all their enemies. They should listen to my mitzvahs, like a river will be their peace. Like sand, which I and all the descendants. Tanaman we learned, going back to this pasuk now, Miyitin, who will give who will give in their hearts, will be strong with me all this time. So you unappreciative degenerates, the children of unappreciative degenerates. Hashem asked this question. It wasn't a rhetorical question. When Hashem said, "Me yitin," who will give them the heart? You should have already said, "Abel should give it to us." To give it to us. And you know why they didn't say that? Because they didn't want to be beholden to the Abel all the time. And they didn't want to be, so you're a comfort. The Abel is giving you such an open hand, an unbelievable matana, and you didn't accept. Where else do you see comfort? Let's see what it says. The mom was a gift from the Abel, and they complained that they said, because they didn't go to the bathroom, they complained. Abel did them a favor that, you don't have to walk out 12 kilometers because you have to and then they complained. And B'nai Kafuya Taiva, where else do you see that, the ancestors also were Kafir Taiva? Chava, the Chsibit says that Isha Shenosata by Adam and Chava, where Adam said to the Abishah, you want to know why I should ask? Isha Shenosata Imodi. I blame it on her. It's your fault. You gave me a wife. Therefore, what do you want? So again, the Abishah gave you a wife and was a beautiful blessing, and instead you complain, use that against the Abishah. What do you want from me? You gave me a wife. That's called a Kafir Taiva. That you don't recognize and appreciate the gifts that you receive. I'll say thank you. Even Moshe Rabbeinu also did not talk about this at Eden until many years. This teichacha that he told Eden, you guys didn't show appreciation of Eibishter, he didn't say to Eden until the very end of the 40 years. And he said to them, she never says, I already walked with you 40 years of sojourn. He never realized the wonderful gifts that the Eibishter is giving only 40 years later. Rabba says, from here we learn now, we also have to say that a person does not really fully grasp or comprehend what Rebbe taught him for 40 years. They had a machik Rashi Teishes means 40 years old, and that's why actually we have a din that you shouldn't be a die until you're 40 years old. Or does it mean, or does it mean that 40 years from when you heard the teaching, take 40 years till it finally sinks in? It finally sinks in. So Chase asks a simple question. If Moshe Rabbeinu didn't realize for 40 years that they were doing something wrong, what do you have time to Eden for? He said, how come you didn't realize? What do you mean, how come? You said yourself, 40 years. You didn't tell us up till right now, but you also didn't understand for 40 years. So Taysom more or less says Moshe Rabbeinu wasn't missing anything. He was waiting to see the Eden, if they finally could wake up to it. And Moshe Rabbeinu, of course, he appreciated it. And he said, praiseworthy are those who plant in all waters, and they send off the feet of the shade and the cow and the donkey. Yisrael, when it's praiseworthy to Eden, but they do two things. They learn trading milchasadim. Remember, we learned oisik b'toida. He lived so many years. The oisik b'toida and milchasadim longer. Rabba was only oisik b'toida predominantly. He lived 40 years. Abaye, who did toida and milchasadim predominantly, so he lived for 60 years. So if you do both of them, is Bisman Shaish comparing Milchasadim Yitzhak, most of the other in control. The Ein Him Misudim Yad Yitzhak, they're not in control in the hand of the Yitzhak. Shenev said Ashrechem praiseworthy Zoyrei, those who plant, Zoyrei seed, that's like Tzedakah, Al Kol Mayim and Mayim El Tzedakah, so therefore we know Tzedakah and Tzedakah. The Ein Zri, it's like planting Tzedakah, they're like Tzedakah, because of the Chesed. That you plant Tzedakah and you will harvest according to the Chesed. The Ein Mayim El Tzedakah and water is Tzedakah. Never says Hay Kol Tzam El Mayim. When it's thirsty, come and drink water. What's this Mishalche Regel Asher V'Chamayim? A person should behave when it comes to Torah, like a shari with a yoke, or a donkey with a weight. Big machlekes in the Mephoshim where the ton of Elio is actually Yo Navi or Ramayda. There's a Birkei Yosef in Hilchos Tefillin, a long Birkei Yosef Chidah in Peik Lamed Aleph. It's in Lamed Aleph, Peik Lamed Aleph, where he talks about. He said he saw a hand manuscript from the Rashba, if you don't have, that Trei Eliyahu, the two Eliyahus. And in Shas, when it says that this Amoida learned Eliyahu, it wasn't Eliyahu Hanavi, it was this Eliyahu who lived 400 years. He straddled the Tanoim and the Amoraim, so therefore he was able to convey to the Amoraim exactly what the Tanoim said, and so on and so forth. And it's not that often that we see Eliyahu, because Eliyahu can't paskin. The famous question is, how can Elio paskin fatal labor shemaim? So I'm safe for the Chayshim Mishpan answers that's Elio only paskin when he came down in the form of a goof. Chida brings from the Rajah who asks this very same question, and he says it's not the same Elio, it's Elio Hanavi. And therefore, according to that, they want to say that Son of Elio is not Elio Hanavi, it's this Elio, this Tana, we call. Heading about it further. Now we're finished with the Galatzer for the time being. We'll get back to it soon. Says the Gemara, it says in the Mishnah, so 3 days prior to the holidays of the Goyim, you shouldn't deal with them. We had a machlek whether you can't sell to them or you cannot buy and sell. We'll see more later a whole chakira. What exactly is the reason? Is it because harvacha, because they're making profits and they can use that money for the Avodah Zarah, or is it because moida, they're going to go and say thank you to their God? And l'chayda, when it comes to borrowing and lending, it's more to do with the thank you than the harvach. Like for example, then the not making profits is just borrowing or lending. Rabbeinu Tam says, even though it says you're not allowed to lend to a guy, but if you're lending with ribos, you're allowed to. Interest, you're allowed to, because you're taking more than you're giving. Gimel Yamim also lost 3 days prior. You're not allowed to deal with that. Why 3 days? Why so long? Generally, it's the same day. But now we learn, for example, we're going to learn Marachulin. About 4 times we have a thing called Oises, but a mother and baby calf. You're not allowed to shech on the same day. So normally, when you buy from a butcher, you don't have to worry. I mean, how often do they shech? And the chances that the mother and the offspring will be shech and slaughtered on the same day, very rare. So you don't have to worry about it. But 4 occasions a year, we eat a lot of meat. And therefore, if the moich is sold that day, the mother or the baby, they have to tell whoever gets it first shech, the other one can't shech. So he has to tell them, by the way, I just sold the mother an hour ago, or I sold the baby calf an hour ago, you better not do any shechting. What are these 4 occasions? But now we learn about you have to tell them, I sold the mother to shech, or beat the mecharti lishchay. These are the 4 occasions. Erev Yom Tov ha'achron shel Chag. Why not Erev Sukkot? Because Erev Sukkot, Rashi says, we're so busy they're preparing for Sukkot that who has time really to spend so much time to go into the sort of Yom Tov and all that? Well, initially the Rishayim thought we're talking about preparing for Kabbanis, but anyway, or because you're so busy preparing Kabbanis, but at the end, but also you have to tell them about the meat. So Erev Shmini Atzeres. Or because, as Taylor says, Simchas Torah was a great Yom Tov. People really had big Kedushim everywhere. He doesn't call Simchas Torah, he calls Shmini Atzeres. But Shmini Atzeres is a big Yom Tov. The only place we have in Shas Simchas Torah is actually in Mar Megillah, by the Kriyas HaTorah. And the Taste is there. And the only, what do you call it? So they're all busy. Horishan Shal Pesach, Erev Yom Tov because called Pesach and called Chagiga. The Erev Atzeres, Erev Shavuos, and Erev Rosh Hashanah. Erev Rosh Hashanah because they eat a lot more meat because it's a simon for the beginning of the year. They would eat lavish meals. Interesting. There's a Toras Chaim in Masechet Chulin that uses this Mishnah to prove that you're not allowed to eat milchas and Shavuos, because he says here the Mishnah clearly says that you eat more meat on Shavuos. Everybody ate meat once a day. So what's Yom Tov? You eat twice a day, much more. And it says here, Erev Shavuos, they would make a lot of meat. Why? Because Shavuos by day they also ate, which means you didn't have milchiks. You had not enough time. And he said, first of all, those who eat only milchiks, there's nothing to talk about. And even those who eat milchiks, he says it's totally wrong. Wrong Toras Chaim in that Mishnah in Masechet Chulin, based on what we just said right there. Continued. Af Erev Yom Kippurim beGalil. In Galil, Erev Yom Kippur, because that's called Oichel v'Shoyse b'Chik. Is a mile of a kosek Gila Yisana v'Yom Tisha city. They took it seriously, and they had big meals. Interesting. That's all the other one Yom Tovim is mainly about meat. Erev Yom Kippur, it's mainly chicken, as Rashi says in Moshe Shabbos. So we say. So someone to say for me is that they used to do kaparas back then already, and therefore they had, that's what it is. In Galil they did kaparas, and that's what has all these chickens that they had to eat. Because the meaning used to be that you would eat this chicken. I remember growing up, that's what we used to do. The chicken, we went in the slaughterhouse there in Arrowhead Heights, in Pitkin Avenue. We went first thing in the morning, and then we somehow or another they cleaned it and everything else, and I used to have the chicken for Sudan Mafshekis. The lachila, so I want to ask like this. Awesome, the lachila there is mainly for eating sagya b'chad yom. It was for 1 day. So now the reason for all of these things is not because of the carbonis, because then it's over the same thing, we're a carbon. So that's why we change around to do with pasha for the eating of the Yom Tov itself. Hoch over here, the lahakrava over here, you bring makra carbon. Bin closer, you need 3 days to examine animal. Like in the base of Midrash, you had 4 days of bikur. They need 3 days. For the mother, if it's ulakrava sagbas, if it's 3 days preparing for Yom Tov, the carbon is 3 days. We learn shaylin behilchas apesach koyim pesach in 30 days, or we had ashbagay mishtesh about 2 weeks. So we answer by us. We're so particular on the saman. Anand shchichim mumay. There's so many mumay in the postly. I feel badukin shabai in the famous story there by Kamsa, even the cataract in the eye. It's been in Tlasin Yem. You got to examine the animal thoroughly, so we need 30 days. Inu the mechusar evislu, but Tlasin Yem they only had the only issa they had was mechusar ever, and therefore 3 days was enough. The only thing, if an entire limb is missing for them, it was possible. But otherwise, 3 days is enough. And Teisha says that this is clear from this Gemara here. The whole idea of 30 days before Yom Tov is mainly to do with kabbanis. And even though today we have no kabbanis, so we continue on early minig. But Teisha is interesting. It says it's not because of all the halachas of Pesach that we wait 30 days. It's mainly to do with the kabbanis. That's how we have it. And Teisha really asks here, so it's clear here that Goyim are not allowed to have an animal, a carbon with Chusra Eber, so how come it's not counted as Zayin Mitzvah V'Nech? And so on. So he says basically that this is not an Avera. This is, if you bring a carbon, it has to be done this way. It's like a Kumba say. You got to bring a proper carbon. And then Mishal Melch himself has all discussions. How come, who says that neder you have to keep? Just because made a promise, that's not part of the Zayin Mitzvah V'Nech either. And there's a whole discussion about that. Anyway, so you want to further, how do we know that? I know bring an animal that for their kabbanis minus a limb. It says by Noyach, I want you to bring all the animals on board. And the kosher animals, we brought so many of them is in order to bring kabbanis. And it says there, Mikol Hachai. It says Mikol Hachai, from all the living. And what's Mikol Hachai? Has to be an entire living animal. Mikol Basa, from every living animal. Shnayim, it should be 2 by each animal. So it said because it says Mikol, the entire animal, means it shouldn't be missing any limbs. Every limb is there complete. So what are we talking about? We use this to remind a treifa, the light. But to tell you that a treifa, and a treifa is worse than a missing a limb. Treifa is an internal thing that it couldn't survive more than a year. That's treifa. So there's no pasuk to tell you that minus a limb is possible for a carbon. So no. Treifa, we have another pasuk. It says in the pasuk by treifa that the l'chay is zera pnekolaris in order to restart to recalibrate the entire animal kingdom and so on. So right here you see, and so what? And the treifa cannot give birth. So the fact that they're able to procreate tells us they're not a treifa. So we know Rei treifa is possible. So what do we do? The pasuk mikol achai, I tell you, it should be minus a limb.
We're trying to work out.
How do you know a goy? No, we're finished. No, look, they're doing it to the Eibishter. Remember, we learn out of the pasuk that if a goy brings the most of kabbalas to us, and Teisha said we're not talking about the kabbalas to bring an animal beich, but on their bummas, and they want to follow the Jewish rules. Sorry. Yeah, but now we're asking a general question. You're saying here is the way they behave with us is how they behave in their Avodah Zarah as well. So if they did not bring a carbon to the Eibishter minus a limb, then they wouldn't have done to the Avodah Zarah as well. Because they treat it equally. They believe in Avodah Zarah. So the Gemara says here, so if treifa, we already know from the Chai Zera, so it must be that we're talking about minus a limb. So the Gemara, if you learn that treifa can't give birth, so you're right. Well, the Chai Zera, you learn now that a treifa already you can't bring. If you hold that, well, a treifa can't give birth. Is mayi kalamema, so we don't know treifa. We'll use the pasuk we call a chai for treifa. Where do you have a pasuk now for minus a limb? On makrok, it says a pasuk. You should bring the animals on a boat, a board. It says you should bring it itcha with you. It says lahachiyos itcha. That they should live with you. Sounds like what we're dashin. They should be just like you, just like you're wholesome. They should be wholesome. You're telling me that That no, we don't need the pasuk of kol achai treifa because we have the pasuk itcha that what just like Noach was healthy, so too the animals have to be healthy, not treifa. How do you know? Pek b'neichel is treifa. And what it says it can be because tamim sivbe because it says tamim, and tamim means that he's whole. But the Gemara do tamim b'drachav. Who said tamim is a gashmistic a physical thing? Maybe it's a tzaddik tamim. He was complete. So you know. No, we're talking about Noach now. It says the animal should be like you. How do you know that it means maybe as far as animals maybe he should be domiciled. It shouldn't be so wild. Yeah, but yeah. You must say no, because a tzaddik tummy. We're saying now it's not one thing. It's two different adjectives. Tzaddik is one adjective. That's the ruchni side. He behaves righteously, and then tummy means physically. He's a healthy person. Yeah. They're all intertwined. Tzaddik sivbe, it says tzaddik. Tamim bedrachav, tzaddik b'maisav. Maybe there's two different things there. There's a tamim bedrachav, which Rashi says drachav means being humble. It's poshet your demeanor, your character, and tzaddik b'maisav is poshet doing the right thing. Rashi says interesting. Tzaddik b'maisav means you're not a ganas. I thought tzaddik b'maisav would be a bit more than that. You're generous, you're magnanimous, and Rashi says below chamas, you're not a ganas. Okay, so it's pretty easy to be a tzaddik then. Easier than thought. Loisak that it can't be the no gufa treifa have. Imor says you can't say that Noach. You're saying that maybe Noach was treif, right? And Tommy means something else. Can't be. Why? Because what are you saying? Itcha. That means I want all the animals to be like you. So what? You want us to find only treif animals? What's he trying to say here? These are the treif have. I only want you to bring animals that are treif, not healthy animals. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, so now that you tell me you learn from the Itcha, now that you tell me you learn treifa from Itcha, so what is the word l'chai? What do you tell me that the reason I want to recalibrate, start life all over again? What's the point of that? They tell me bring the animals. I would have thought that if it would say Itcha, I want you to bring animals with you, I would have thought bring them to keep you company. If they're alone, no other people were saved except their immediate family, and you get tired being a whole year on the same boat in the same floor and everything else. So at least the animal keep you occupied. You'll have interesting company. And therefore you would think, okay, you cannot bring a treifa, but what about an animal that's not going to procreate, an older animal, or a sodis, the barren celibate, where they can't bring it, they can't have any, maybe it's all right. Therefore, Taylor says, don't bring any old animals, and don't bring any sodis, the castrated animals. We want, the purpose is, I want to regenerate life all over again. Okay, tomorrow starts in the sugya. Have a good day. He wasn't. Gemara says can't be that he was a treifa because then it sounds like in the pasuk they only want to bring animals that are treifa on the boat. No more. So how are they going to check the animals to see the treifa anyway? That was in the middle. But I'm saying, how were they meant to check? Treifa is internal. How are you going to check?
CT scan or something of the lungs.